Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and my part was originally offered to Sean Penn.
Oh, I could have co-hosted this podcast with Sean Penn?
I'm here because you turned it down, Josh.
Well, I think you're clearly a better choice, so I'm glad that it worked out.
Think of the arguments you could be having with him.
I don't. I feel like I would lose because he's Sean Penn, and nobody cares what I think if I'm arguing with Sean Penn. So
that's
definitely better this way. So in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we've been talking about the films of 1984. And this episode is Jason's personal pick. So, Jason, what did you pick?
Josh, I picked a film that has really never left the pop cultural consciousness, but really has come back with a vengeance, much like the Cobra Kai might have. I picked The Karate Kid, Josh, and I love it.
Yeah, well, I would hope that you love it. It would be weird if you picked a movie that you hated.
So, I picked Cabin Boy in season 1, and because
that's true.
So I didn't hate it.
You don't hate Cabin Boy, yeah.
How could anyone hate Cabin Boy?
Well, that's you can listen to our episode and learn about that. Go back and listen to the Cabin Boy episode. But right now we're going to talk about The Karate Kid, which, as you say, Jason, certainly has really never left the pop cultural consciousness and was a massive hit right away. It was the number 5 grossing movie at the 1984 box office. So as we've been saying a lot this season, this was a year of just so many big influential blockbusters. And this is yet another one. And it was sort of a surprise hit. It was a relatively small budget, only $8 million. And it ended up grossing $100 million. So certainly a huge, huge hit and big launching pad or relaunching pad for its stars. And Pat Morita, or Noriyuki Pat Morita, as he's credited in this film, was even nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his role as Mr. Miyagi, the karate mentor to Daniel LaRusso, played by Ralph Macchio. He did not win, and I like him in this movie, but it is a little crazy that he was nominated for an Oscar.
Nah, I think it's perfectly fitting, and I would have been fine if he won, Josh. Also, this film, as you said, huge sleeper hit. I saw a quote from the writer Robert Mark Kamen, who said that basically the studio just stopped advertising. They didn't think it was going to be anything. So after 2 weeks, it was all a word of mouth hit, which is amazing. Good for the Karate Kid.
Yeah, and I mean, whether you like this movie or not, I think you can see how this would be something that would really energize audiences, and especially teenage audiences in 1984. It's certainly a feel-good kind of movie, the kind of movie that you come out of and you're all pumped up, and that's certainly the way that it's designed. I mean, it was created, it was directed by John G. Avildsen.
Wait, Josh. Before you get in there, I just want to say,
oh, please.
I'm very excited. We have a special guest today talking about feel-good, pump you up music here. I don't even want to tease it. I just want to let the audience know a little later on, we will be interviewing Joe Esposito. He's the best around at singing You're the Best Around, the most famous song to come out of The Karate Kid. Go on, Josh, do whatever you want. I just wanted to plug our guest because I feel like this is as good as it gets, buddy.
Well, I'm very excited that we have that guest. I don't want to say, because you never know. We can always even let's continue to be ambitious, and we're still working on those interviews with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, right, Dave?
Yeah. Dave, did you contact Martin Brest yet?
He hasn't returned my call.
Oh man, but no, that is going to be exciting to talk to Joe Esposito, who sang "You're the Best." And there's a lot of music in this movie that would get you kind of pumped up, and that is at the top, but it's not even the only song in this movie that has that effect. What I was going to say is that this movie is essentially designed that way. It was directed by John G. Avildsen, who directed Rocky, and was definitely set up as kind of, here's his next Rocky-esque project. And the writer, Robert Mark Kamen, was brought in to create a story like that. And he drew on some of his own experiences as a teenager with learning martial arts. But this is a movie that is clearly crafted very, very carefully to be a crowd pleaser, and it succeeds at that, I think, pretty well.
Yes, it does succeed at that, and part of that is Kamen just crushes it on structure. He really, really, there might be certain things you don't like about the movie, but he really nailed the structure of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a movie that you could study as a screenwriter for how to make something like this work. And in addition to its success, it was generally well reviewed by critics. It got 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. And what I enjoyed in watching their segment is they both liked the movie. Ebert liked it more, but they both liked it. And at the end of the segment, Ebert predicts that Pat Morita may get an Oscar nomination, and Siskel is just totally dismissive. He says, no way. And of course, Siskel was completely wrong about that. And Roger Ebert also picked this as one of the best movies of 1984. In his review, he said, "The Karate Kid was one of the nice surprises of 1984. An exciting, sweet-tempered, heartwarming story with one of the most interesting friendships in a long time. The Karate Kid was directed by John G. Avildsen, who made Rocky. It ends with the same sort of climactic fight scene. Daniel faces his enemies in a championship karate tournament. But the heart of this movie isn't in the fight sequences, it's in the relationships. The Karate Kid is a sleeper with a title that gives you the wrong idea. It's one of 1984's best movies." And he has a whole thing in the review complaining about the title that I left out, which is, I mean, I guess it sounds a little goofy, but it's pretty accurate as to what the movie is about.
Well, I often reference that book that I like, The Ultimate History of Teen Movies, 80s teen movies. And I was reading about it today, and there was a quote from Ralph Macchio when he was talking about, auditioning for Avildsen in, Avildsen's apartment. And there's a whole line of actors outside, and literally they're all making fun of the title. Like, they all thought it was a stupid title. But I think, the success of it overtook what, kind of worries they had about it. The other thing, Josh, about that review that's so fun is you look back and, like, he mentions many times what a sleeper hit it is, right? And
Right.
it's so funny to think of it as such a sleeper hit because it is so iconic, as, that's the word of the year, maybe, in this one. Teenage and iconic.
Yes, that is the theme that's been running through so many of our episodes. And and I think Ebert is thinking of it as a sleeper hit, but also as a sleeper kind of in terms of his expectations, that he went in thinking this was not going to be any good and was pleasantly surprised with it.
And I think that's something you were getting at, why it was such a hit, because it did have the heart, the action, the comedy, everything that, and, in a little ways, the romance, the boys could take the girls to the movies, so on and so forth. Like, it hit a lot of quadrants, man.
That it did. And speaking of the title, the funny thing to me is that obviously the title was very important to them because Karate Kid is a lesser known DC Comics superhero, and they actually had to license that name from DC Comics in order to use it and presumably pay them some money. So it was, instead of just changing the title, they were obviously very attached to it. So for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, there you go. Fun fact, guys.
There you go. Full of fun facts here on Awesome Movie Year.
And Josh, you know who loves the fun facts? Our loyal listeners in Algeria. Thanks for making us number one in the film history section of podcasts. We love you, Algerian listeners.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like it could be like one listener there.
Josh, let's just move on, can we?
All right. Thank you, Algeria. Janet Maslin in the New York Times was positive, but a little more mixed. She said, "A large part of the Karate Kid, the best part really, seems to be taking place inside a fortune cookie. It is here, in the serene realm of Oriental wisdom, Hollywood style, that a teenager named Daniel is taught lesson after lesson about life. His instructor is an elderly man named Mr. Miyagi, who is first seen trying to catch flies with a pair of chopsticks. Throughout the film, Mr. Miyagi sustains a scene-stealing, if hokey, eccentricity. When karate is not being treated as the latest excuse for an impossible dream success story, and when the film is able to find more in Daniel's martial arts career than pure Rocky-esque competitiveness, The Karate Kid exhibits warmth and friendly, predictable humor, its greatest assets." And she liked the relationship there between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi and not so much anything else in the movie. But I agree with her that that's probably the strongest part.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say you're not just rooting for Daniel because he's the protagonist, but because he's very likable, and that relationship is so, you attach yourself to it. So you want them to win, not just because you're supposed to want them to win, but because they make you want them to win.
Yeah, I mean, I like their relationship. I'm not sure Daniel is that likable, honestly, and that's a whole thing.
You and your
I was
Big
going to
Bang
say the
Theory.
same thing.
No. I mean, I think the truth that's it's like a whole thing, and we'll talk about Cobra Kai later, I'm sure. But the idea that Johnny Lawrence, the bully / rival, is the real hero, and I think neither Daniel nor Johnny is particularly. I don't really like either of them that much, but I do think that the relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi helps to make Daniel likable, if he's at times acting kind of like a dick.
Well, what's the matter, Josh? You don't like a kid from Jersey?
I love those kids from Jersey.
Yeah.
Jersey is. I don't think I don't know if I've ever even been to New Jersey. Jason.
Yeah, didn't you stay with me at my grandma's when we drove cross country? As if anyone cares. So
did we stay at your? I don't know. This
or
is
you
really
picked me up from my grandma's.
Maybe I picked you up there. Yeah, it's possible. So
yeah,
let's move.
We drove through Jersey and it was like, hey, how you doing? What you doing here? Meatball. That is horrible. I'm offended, and I'm from New Jersey.
Now I remember. Richard Schickel in Time Magazine was not a fan, and he basically dismissed this movie in a longer piece about a bunch of summer 1984 movies that he thought were basically worthless mainstream movies. He said, "This film's art consists entirely of hiding the cynicism of its calculations under an agreeably modest and disarming manner. In this, it is greatly aided by Ralph Macchio as the kid and Noriyuki Pat Morita as the apartment handyman who teaches martial arts and pacifistic wisdom to the 97-pound weakling tired of being beaten up by the bullies at school. Robert Mark Kamen's script is developed with maddening predictability, and John G. Avildsen's direction is literal and ambling. Films like this are what the PG rating is supposed to be all about, and how one longs to spot a few gremlins chuckling malevolently in the corner." So bring that back to a movie that we talked about earlier in the season.
What else did he crush? Did you read the whole thing? He probably crushed all the classic films of '84 that we all went on to love.
No, I forget one. The one he started with was something that I had never even heard of, actually. And I can't remember what it was and what the third one was. But I think this was actually the most well-known movie among those that he mentioned there. But he wasn't here. I can actually, it's exciting real-time looking.
Yeah. While you do that, I just want to say how silly it is that was his criticism, and the sequences of Daniel learning the movements of karate without knowing that he's learning the movements of karate have become one of the, most recognizable in film history that's been, homage, spoofed, whatever, hundreds of times. It works so well. That's why we keep seeing it over and over. And the way it's done here is just the best of that version.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the reasons it seems predictable now is because of that. And I don't know how predictable and familiar it was at the time, but he obviously thought that it was. And I take it back. I had actually heard of both of these. The first movie he talks about is Rhinestone, the notorious Dolly Parton, Sylvester Stallone country music movie. And then the second movie he talks about is Top Secret from the Zucker team, who we've talked about in our episode on Kentucky Fried Movie. So did not care for any of those, but...
And a weird trio to pair together,
Well, I assume it was just because they were all coming out in the same week, and that's how it works when you are, working on a weekly schedule and a deadline and whatnot.
But Josh, I want to get back to something that you said there, because I think you're right. And I was thinking about this too while I was watching it this time. Had we ever seen something like that, where they're the equivalent to the wax on, wax off, you mentioned Rocky, he's basically training. The only thing that we see is him trying to chase the chicken, right? That's one of the iconic things
in Rocky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he also doesn't he punch cuts of meat in Rocky?
Yeah, but that's
unconventional thing.
That's kind of unconventional, but that's still hey, I'm going through the traditional movements as you recognize them, right? You recognize him punching big slab of body there, right? The reason he did that was because that's what they had access to, because he was, poor guy, or guy from Philadelphia, local guy, right? But I'm saying, like, the chicken I get as like, hey, how is this boxing training? Why am I chasing a chicken around, right? In the same way as paint the fence, how is this karate training? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that sequence is so important. And as we saw, which again, I'm sure we'll talk about in Legacy, in the 2010 remake with Jackie Chan and Jaden Smith, much better than that version of Jacket On, Jacket Off, which apparently no one ever thought might have another meaning.
I forgot about. I've seen that movie and I forgot about that. That's unfortunate.
You were smart to forget about that film.
Yeah. So, Jason, I assume, given that this is so beloved for you, that you saw this movie sometime as a kid?
I saw this movie so many times. I've seen it as a kid. I used to watch it with, in the summer, I would spend like a lot of time with my grandparents and their friends, and one of their friends who was like a neighbor. We used to watch it together like a lot. And I think that's what's cool, is like it kind of goes through generations. Like anyone can watch it and enjoy it. And I just kind of, found it again a few years ago, hadn't watched it like for a while. And now it's one of those movies I could watch every year and it's fine. So,
yeah. All right. Yeah. I don't know if I probably saw it as a kid, but it's one of those things. And that's just, this come up a lot in this season, where I don't remember the first time I saw it. And I probably saw it in pieces on TV over the course of a number of years, but I'm sure I had seen it. And I remember specifically watching it before that remake came out, in sort of anticipation of that, when I was going to review the remake. And that was the last time I saw it, which was, I think, about 10 years ago, before watching it again this week. And so I didn't have like the nostalgic attachment necessarily that you had. I don't know that I'd ever seen any of the sequels, the initial sequels. Or there was, Dave will probably remember this. Dave, was there a Karate Kid video game on the like Nintendo, and the original Nintendo?
I'm sure there was at some point. I don't really remember it though, surprisingly. You'd think that would have been a bigger game, but I don't remember it.
Yeah, I feel like I might have played that.
Yeah, I did see the sequels. Karate Kid 2, not bad. And then it just gets progressively worse,
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the Jackie Chan, Jaden Smith one was such a misguided effort, even though it was made money, But obviously the redemption has come in just the home run of Cobra Kai, where they just hit it out of the park. And it's funny because we call this a sleeper hit, and I guess this goes to the legacy, but Cobra Kai is a sleeper hit because it was on YouTube Red for like 2 years, and people were like, oh, it's good, but no one really cared until it got to Netflix, and then, it exploded. And they just got it right. And it's so hard to get something right that that you're kind of capturing 30, 40 years later, right? 35 years later, just about. And they just did such an awesome job with that.
Well, we'll talk more about that later. Dave, did you watch Karate Kid as a kid?
I'm sure I watched it a ton of times as a kid, but when I went to rewatch this last week, I didn't remember any of it. I mean, it must have been at least 30 years since I'd seen it.
Wow, yeah.
That's exciting.
Even having seen it 10 years ago, there were some parts I totally forgot about the entire existence of Elisabeth Shue's character in this movie.
I have like this whole movie in my head very clear. It's interesting. And I'm interested to hear, especially Dave. Josh, you're all right too, but after not seeing it for 30 years, this next segment of what we thought about it shall be quite a barn burner.
Yes, it will. So we'll come back then and talk about our general thoughts on The Karate Kid. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1984, we're talking about Jason's pick, which is The Karate Kid. And we'll also mention again, because I know Jason is very excited, we have Joe Esposito coming up in a little bit to talk about his song, You're the Best, which is certainly one of the best aspects of this movie. And we were talking about, just before the break, about forgetting, Dave and I not having seen this movie in a while and forgetting aspects. And that was one thing. Like, I knew that song was coming, but I didn't remember where. And so I spent the whole movie thinking, when is You're the Best coming? When is You're the Best coming? And it doesn't come until almost the end of the movie. I was
That's true, but it comes at the absolute right time.
The best time, in fact.
Heyo.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Josh, you were talking about You're the Best there. And as you mentioned, so many songs from this really give you that energy. Cruel Summer, Bananarama, that was the big hit there, you know. Young Hearts by Commuter, that I don't know how that one didn't become a hit, but it all leads to that All Valley tournament. And Joe Esposito's You're the Best Around is really the climactic song of the whole thing.
That it is, but maybe we should step back before we talk about the climax and kind of delve into the earlier parts of the film. Or this is a slow movie, and one of the things in watching the Siskel and Ebert segment that Siskel was less into was the pacing and how long this movie is. And I think you're not wrong that the screenplay is structured pretty well, but it did feel a bit pokey to me at times. And definitely when I was sitting down to watch it, and I was like, oh, this movie's got to be like 90 minutes long. And I looked at it and I realized that it was 127 minutes. That seemed wrong to me. And I don't think it needs to be that long, but it's not egregious necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't have many criticisms of this film, but I'll give you that one. At the same time, I love the structure of it because, you know, the pacing is always moving to something else, right? It's not just there for no reason. So when we get that confrontation, that first confrontation with Daniel and Johnny 10 minutes in, it would have been easy to just kind of ramp that up. And I think it would have, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, blown its load too early in the film, you know. But the fact that they kind of keep teasing and taunting each other, and then they have to, you know, have a truce until the All Valley tournament lets us develop all of those other things. Like, everything is put in a place for a reason, which is what I think is so smart about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think despite how he's been kind of brought back in recent stuff, I wouldn't say that Johnny is really developed as a character in any way. So I think you get all you need to get about the conflict between Daniel and Johnny in the very first scene where they meet. And I think the development that works or that is rewarding is the relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. And that is a lot of what happens in the middle of the movie. I mentioned that I had completely forgotten about Elisabeth Shue's character, who she plays Allie, the former girlfriend of Johnny, who is now into Daniel. And I thought literally everything about the storyline between Daniel and Allie was worthless. And I really forgot how much there was in this movie about that.
No.
And anytime they're dealing with her and also his behavior in the movie, if you want to talk about when Daniel is unlikable, it's every time he interacts with her. And so I could have done without all of that.
He's a teenage boy, Josh, hormonally crazed.
Yes.
So, but some of the most memorable things in the movie revolve around Allie, whether it's, you know, Daniel in the shower costume, you know, kind of pouring the hose on Johnny, or Daniel kind of going to the dance to pick up Allie when, you know, and Johnny kind of kisses her, which, by the way, what a great look from William Zabka when he sees that Ralph Macchio sees them dancing together. He's got such a sly, great look on his face, you know, and then, you know, he gets all the food on him. Plus that, you know, we talk about the montage sequence, you know, of the training and everything. But I have to say, I think the montage of them on the date at the golfing, what is it called? Golfing stuff or whatever?
Golfing stuff, man. Come on. I grew up in Southern California. And golfing stuff is sacred.
There you go. Well, that I think is almost as iconic as the training montage. That's like literally the great 80s teenage date montage right there.
I mean, I love golfing stuff, but 100% no on that. I mean, as iconic as the training, like the training is so iconic. I mean, that is like indelible in pop culture. And that date sequences, I mean, I guess it's fine as far as those things go, but it's not any better than anything else in so many other 80s teen movies, which, as we've established, there's dozens. So no, I mean, I didn't hate it, but I definitely felt like every time it's like, oh no, he's gonna have another fight with Allie. Like I was not into that at all. And I was ready to just move on from that. So, I mean, I understand that's important to establish sort of his rivalry with Johnny as they're fighting over this girl. But I just thought there was way too much about their relationship. And that's when he's always a jerk to her. And then he just expects to be forgiven, which she does. And I just didn't care about their relationship, nor did I like want them to have a relationship. So
well, I want to get Dave's take on that, but also, Josh, I think you're omitting something very important, which is that, Allie is like you, Josh, a rich Southern California girl, and
sure.
Daniel, like me, is just a kid from Jersey, working class, blue collar. So he feels out of place. He's from Reseda, she's from the hills. Like, he's got a chip or some type of insecurity about taking her out because he doesn't have the cool car. They're driving around in the mom's station wagon. So yes, you can give Daniel a lot of crap, but also there's like a lot of character development and background in those scenes. So, Dave, did you have a problem with that love story?
I got to side with Josh on this one. Yeah, I just found Daniel to be such kind of a dick in a lot of these scenes. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy the movie, though. There's still, plenty of fun to be had, especially, all of the interactions with Mr. Miyagi and all that, all the training, all that stuff is a lot of fun and just classic 80s. But yeah, the love story didn't really do much for me. And the character is just like, eh.
Did you think he was a dick, or was it just a lot of miscommunication, as can happen in teenage romances?
I think he's a dick.
Yeah, he's definitely a dick, because it's not even that, like, he just always assumes the worst about her. He never gives her the benefit of the doubt ever, and he never considers her feelings. And no, he's a total dick to her. And that's not to say, again, going back to this idea in pop culture of Johnny being the one who's right. Johnny is also a dick, and worse. He's abusive. He's a terrible guy and deserves to have his ass kicked. But I mean, I sort of felt like I was invested in Daniel succeeding because of Mr. Miyagi, not because of Daniel. And Mr. Miyagi is this guy who sort of has this hidden talent, and he's just working as a handyman, and he's never really appreciated. And Daniel is able to kind of give him a purpose in life. And that, I thought, was a really nice character arc. And there's that scene, and one of the reviews I quoted, it might have been the New York Times review, really criticizes that scene where Mr. Miyagi gets drunk and kind of talks about his dead wife and his experiences in the war. And I thought that scene was so good because it gives you so much depth to that character in a short amount of time. So I do enjoy this movie. I think it's silly. And I think I looked back, and when I saw it in 2010 on Letterboxd, I only gave it 2 stars. And I like it more than that. And I don't know why I was so down on it at that time. But
what was going on with you, Josh?
I don't know. I was in a dark place, maybe something like that. I was mad that I had to go see a Jaden Smith movie the next week or whatever.
Couldn't blame you on that. Hey, Josh, I agree with you on that scene, and I know that was one like the studio wanted to pull and the filmmakers fought to keep in, and it is so important because he is Japanese, he's Okinawan, and yet we learned that he fought for the 442nd Infantry, which, the American unit in the war, while his wife was in an internment camp dying. And it kind of shows some honor, a real honor and nobility and regalness about him. And also just, a side of ugly America that we're just starting to deal with, I think. Right. And I did a little research on that unit. Did you know they're like the most decorated unit in like the history of war or something like that?
I did not know that, but I was, and that was one aspect that, again, I didn't quite remember. I was pretty impressed with the way that they address like Japanese internment camps. And I don't know, but I would imagine this might be one of the first mainstream Hollywood movies to even bring that up. So I thought that was quite good.
Yeah, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the most highly decorated in U.S. military history, which was all, if I'm not mistaken, Japanese expats fighting for America. So that's really interesting. And yes, you're right. Like, it really shows another side to Mr. Miyagi, who we always see as either calm or kind of joking and having fun. And like, you see that he has dealt with a lot of pain. And, as a Japanese American at this point, that he's dealt with it from a lot of Americans probably throughout his life.
Right. And we see only one scene where there's those random jerks on the beach that make some kind of racist remarks to Mr. Miyagi, but otherwise that doesn't really come up. But certainly you get the idea that that's something that he's had to deal with for his entire life and is part of why maybe he's just working as this, building handyman or whatever and hasn't sort of gotten the recognition that he deserves. Although I did wonder, he works as the handyman. He has this giant spread of a property where he lives. He's got this nice house, this huge Japanese garden, a bunch of old cars. Where does Mr. Miyagi's money come from?
Well, I was thinking about that too, right? First of all, the cars, I'm guessing he basically all restored. That's what we're to believe, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of, they were junkers that he restored. And then, let's say he bought that property in the 50s and just kind of, made it beautiful on his own over the years. I could see that,
Yeah, I guess so. It is on the other side of the tracks, as they very specifically note when they first drive to it, crossing the literal tracks. So yeah, I mean, that's a nitpick and it's fine. And it's one of those things where if you're entertained, then you're not really thinking about it too much. But it just, having seen it a few times now, it just kind of stuck out to me.
But Josh, that's a nice sequence that you're kind of getting at too. We've talked about, the training montages, but the birthday sequence where he gives him the gi and then the car, that really kind of solidifies, just how deep their friendship has become.
Right, it does. And again, I think that friendship between them is the best aspect of the movie, more so than, again, the rivalry with Johnny and the Cobra Kais, or certainly the love story with Allie. And I mean, his relationship with his mom is nice, although she disappears for long parts of the movie.
Yeah.
And I was amused that also that they talk about how they moved to California because she's gotten a job in computers, and then she ends up being a waitress and says that being a restaurant manager is going to work out so much better than being in computers. And boy, did she have the wrong prediction for where things would go in our economy.
I mean, Josh, she's from Newark. So let's talk about the economy of Newark, and maybe they could have invested in a few more computers. I would agree with that.
Yeah, so. Yeah. So, but she's likable. I mean,
she is, and they have a nice rapport and a good, kind of fun back and forth. And I think you see that right away in the road trip together. And she's always got this positive attitude. She comes back in Cobra Kai for a few episodes, and she's fun. Originally, Valerie Harper was considered for that role, Josh.
No, that would have been kind of nice, actually. I mean, not that Randee Heller is bad. She's good, and she's got some awesome 80s hair.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great 80s hair in this movie, really.
So, Josh, since we're doing my favorite alternative casting here, let's see. Demi Moore as Allie.
Yeah.
Crispin Glover as Johnny. That would have been a weird turn, huh?
That would have been amazing. And you know what would have been even more amazing is Cobra Kai, the series starring Crispin Glover now.
Yeah, that would have been strange. I don't even know how to process Crispin Glover as Johnny at this point in my head. And then the typical bunch of actors, as we said, Sean Penn, Robert Downey Jr., supposedly Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez, Hey, we could add Nicolas Cage against Crispin Glover, Anthony Edwards.
That would have been amazing. I feel like, again, right now, if you have a movie that's like Nicolas Cage versus Crispin Glover in 2020, I want to see that.
Yeah, that means more now to me. So
yeah, I suppose.
C. Thomas Howell, Tom Cruise was one, of course, and Eric Stoltz. But my favorite was Kyle Eastwood, Clint Eastwood's son, auditioned, didn't get the role, and then Clint Eastwood banned Coke from his set because the people who own Coke own the same studio that made this film.
Weird. It does seem like that list is just every male star who was around that age in 1984. And
where's Rob Lowe?
That's true. But I mean, and Ralph Macchio was in. I mean, his sort of one major role before this was in The Outsiders, right? Which features some of those same people. So that was certainly like the class, the maybe not the Brat Pack specifically, but that sort of generation of young actors who got all these mainstream parts in the 80s. And I think plenty of those actors would have been fine in this role. I think Ralph Macchio is good. And part of the reason is he's real scrawny, Ralph Macchio. And he really gives you the sense of this kid as an underdog.
Yeah, he can take a beating. right?
He can.
So but I think it's good, like in that first sequence on the beach where he does take the beating, but he also stands up for himself. Like it kind of helps you root for that character in that, like, he's not just going to be bullied around, and then we get to the Halloween dance and, he takes his beating again because of his own actions,
Right. Yeah.
But
I mean, he has some integrity there in that first confrontation where he's trying to help Allie, but he definitely antagonizes them afterwards.
they antagonize each other,
Yeah.
The Cobra Kai on the soccer field, they play dirty against him. And yeah, there's a lot of that for sure.
Yeah. So do we want to mention Martin Kove as Kreese, the really cartoonishly evil head of the dojo, the Cobra Kai dojo? I mean, he really leans into it. Like he could be the villain in a Chuck Norris movie.
Strike
in this month.
Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, Josh.
Yeah. I mean, and whereas Johnny is sort of a typical just like teenage dickhead, and he's not likable, but you can sort of see him as a real person. Like Kreese is just a cartoon character.
Kreese is so good in Cobra Kai. He hasn't toned it down at all, but it kind of matches where Cobra Kai is going. And I love him in that. And, Josh, as we know, one of the most famous lines in cinematic history, sweep the leg.
Yeah, there's a lot of really iconic lines. We didn't even mention wax on, wax off. I mean, we kind of mentioned that concept, but that line, and that's one of those things where you're just waiting for him to say it.
Right, paint the fence, all that stuff,
Right, right.
And I wanted to bring up one point, Josh, because you had mentioned the review that talked about like stilted directing. I thought there were a lot of beautiful shots in those training montages.
Yeah, I think this is a well-directed film. And I mean, you can certainly see how they would have hired John G. Avildsen after Rocky, and that this movie is sort of, you can see this movie as very similar, not just in the structure, but the way he sensitively treats this kind of story. And I think this is one of those movies like Rocky that if you hadn't seen it before, you think of it as kind of this silly pop culture thing. And there's a lot more heart to it and a lot more grit to it than you might imagine, and especially compared to the sequels. And that's the same thing for Rocky, is it becomes a pop culture sensation and the sequels lean into that and they're not as good. But here, there is a lot of heart and a lot of character development. And I think that works for it. I don't love it, but I like it more than I apparently did in 2010.
Do you see why not only I, but many other people love it?
No, I can absolutely see why people love it. And like I said, especially for something that I'm sure at the time that it came out was such a movie for kids to get pumped up about. And even if you see it, years later, however many years later, when you're a kid at the time, I can absolutely see that as a movie that has a nostalgic appeal, but also, just has that kind of crowd pleasing aspect. And I think this is one of those movies that maybe because I wasn't particularly attached to it as a kid, I don't have that nostalgic association. And so I'm less sort of inclined to love it, but it's a well-made film. It is a well-made film.
Well, I'll take that from you. And also, I just want to say, as we said before, it's not just kids, man. This thing it transcends geographic and demographic boundaries, Josh.
That it does. Well, of course, Roger Ebert was not a kid in 1984 and certainly was well taken with this film.
I did judo as a kid. Did you guys do any martial arts?
I definitely did not. Did you?
Oh, yeah. I was terrible, but I did
it. That is not a surprise.
Do you if your mom's listening, can you put up a picture of Dave in his, what'd you do, karate?
Yep, absolutely. She still has sitting in the living room the board that I chopped.
Oh, that sounds right. Can we get a picture of you in the gi?
I'm sure we can make that happen.
Let's hope so. We can put that on the Patreon for $100 to see Dave in his karate outfit.
I mean, we can keep talking, but I think this is probably as well known a film as we've covered throughout the course of awesome movie year. So do we want to rate this one, Josh, out of 5 Halloween skeleton costumes?
That's a not very essential aspect of the movie, but
do you want to rate it out of 5 All Valley Championships
or whatever? Crane kicks, it doesn't matter. We can go with you know what? It's your episode, Jason. Let's go with your suggestion. Let's rate it out of 5 skeleton Halloween costumes.
No, I'm on the All Valley Championships already.
All right. Okay. Well, whatever it is, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. It's fun. I don't love it.
All right. Dave?
I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 as well.
All right. Gets 4.5 from me, and you two are showing your ass.
Wow, that is like a lot.
I love it.
High.
It's almost perfect. I mean, you guys have brought some things to my attention. Maybe I drop it to a 4, but it's almost a perfect film. And
All right.
we should discuss that with our guest, Joe Esposito.
Yeah, so we're excited to talk to Joe Esposito, which we will do in a moment.
All right, we are back here on Awesome Movie Year, and we have a special guest with us. He is the best around. Joe Esposito, everybody. Man, how you doing, Joe?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing well. Joe, when you recorded this song, did you think that 40 years later you could still be living off of it?
No, absolutely not. I remember, I can tell you this. A lot of people used to use me for this. I call this my meatloaf voice, that growl and all that stuff. And I remember doing this and I was sweating and I was like, oh, this is crazy. Karate Kid. The hit off the movie was the Bananarama tune, Cool Cruel Summer. Nothing with You're the Best. Maybe 20, 25 years later, my son grows up, becomes a Major League Baseball pitcher. But when he was at Arizona State, he calls me one day and he says, "Hey, Dad, you're not going to believe this, but pitchers are coming out, and when they're warming up, they're using the song from the Karate Kid." I'm like, "You kidding me?" And then when he got drafted to the Colorado Rockies as a rookie, because they knew he was my son, they made him sing the song. And then from there, I started to be aware that, wow, people are using this song. I see it at Manny Pacquiao walks into the ring. It's in a commercial. And then, it just snowballed from there. I mean, hey, like a gift from God. That's all I can tell you.
So are you saying from 84 for about 20 years, it just was kind of dormant and then just exploded back onto pop culture through sports?
I believe so. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but yeah, I believe so. It became like a sports anthem,
Yeah, that's amazing. I know, like you said, there are baseball teams and the Devils, we're both from back east. Whenever Martin Brodeur would make a save, they would play You're the Best Around. There's a lot of wrestlers who came out to it and Manny Pacquiao. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Tell us about when you originally recorded it, because it wasn't slated for the Karate Kid originally.
Originally, here's what happened. I used to do some work for Sylvester Stallone, and I think it was for Rocky III. I think Rocky III came after the movie Staying Alive. Sylvester Stallone asked his brother to get in touch with me. He loved my group, the Brooklyn Dreams. And so we wrote a bunch of songs for the movie Staying Alive. And I believe, now I knew Allie Willis from way back in New York. And she was a songwriter, and she had asked me to sing the song because her and Bill Conti wrote this song for Rocky III. And there's a lyric in there that says, "History repeats itself." And it really doesn't match up for the Karate Kid because it's about him fighting Clubber Lang. He loses, he comes back and he beats him. He regains his title. But the Scotti brothers, who had a record company and they were tied in with Stallone, they had Eye of the Tiger, the Survivor song, which is a great song. So it didn't make Rocky III. Now, John Avildsen, who directed Rocky I, was directing the Karate Kid. He liked the song so much, he put it in the Karate Kid, and that's how it wound up in the Karate Kid.
And tell us about the first time you saw that sequence where the song is used in the All Valley tournament, because it brings such an energy to the film.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. I didn't really think too much of it. I mean, it was another song that I did because, I was in the middle of doing all different types of stuff for different types of movies. I had done Flashdance. I was working with Donna Summer, so there was so much going on. And I thought it was great for the scene, but that was it. I didn't really think this has turned out to be one of the biggest things I've ever done. And I've done some other things that, like Flashdance with Lady Lady. It was like a hit all over the world except the US. Heaven Knows was a number 3 record. I co-wrote Bear Girls. But again, that was like on the strength of Donna Summer. I mean, I just happened to be there. I mean, it was good, but it was really on the strength of who she was. But this particular song is really my little thing, I guess, that, nobody really helped me. It just became, well, I guess you could say Sylvester Stallone helped me, because if it wasn't for, I guess, Rocky III, maybe it wouldn't have gotten in the Karate Kid. But hey, I'm very happy. I'm happy to be here talking to you guys too. So.
Well, we're happy to have you. Were you doing a lot of soundtrack specific work in the 80s?
Yeah, I did a bunch of stuff. And I got to tell you, sometimes people send me stuff and I'm like, I don't remember doing that. And I'm not senile or nothing. Like, my son will send me something. Hey, Dad, look at this. This is a song I did with this kid, Tommy Fuchsberger, in Europe. And I remember going to Europe and singing with him and doing a record with him. And then I wind up, I see this video and I'm like, what is this? I don't even remember this. So I don't search out myself on the internet. People send me stuff. Hey, look at this. You did this in Scarface. There's a song called Success that I did in the Scarface movie through Giorgio Moroder. I don't remember doing it. I got to tell you, because I did so many things that these things pop up and I'm like, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting,
Giorgio Moroder is someone I was going to bring up because he was such a influence or forefather on that synth sound, him and Harold Faltermeyer in the 80s. Yeah, so I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little about the development of that sound and just how much it meant to music and soundtracks in the 80s.
Well, he was a force for sure, especially with Donna Summer, and then the movie soundtracks. He did Midnight Express. He did Top Gun. He's done a lot of movies. So he really liked me because I would do stuff pretty quick. And for Flashdance, I remember they were kind of talking about, they didn't really think the movie was going to be that big. I was working on Staying Alive. I sang Lady Lady. At some point, he was thinking of having me sing the Irene Cara tune. And at the last minute, they picked Irene Cara. And he was just great to work with. And I loved being around him because he was so innovative. Just, the 80s. I mean, he seemed to own the 80s with all the soundtracks and stuff,
Yeah. One thing we were talking about, and we were too young to know it, but Karate Kid was like a surprise hit in 84. It wasn't like a big slated, predictable hit. Can you talk about how it maybe just took on a life of its own back then?
I don't know. It's almost like it's became like a cult movie years later, I don't know how that happens. All I know is I sang the song in the movie. And of course, now with the resurgence of Cobra Kai, which came out of nowhere again, 35 years later, all of a sudden, now they're going to be using my song in season 3, which is, hey, it's like a gift. I call it the gift that keeps on giving. I don't know what to even say about how it happened. Like I say, I was doing so many things. I never gave it a second thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I love Cobra Kai. I think they nailed it, the tone and everything. And I'm so happy to hear that they're going to use the song in it.
Yeah, I actually, I got a call from one of the creators of Cobra Kai a couple of weeks ago. And he says, we took a lot of heat for not using your song in the first 2 seasons. Everybody was saying, hey, they're using every song and they're not using your song. I'm like, I had no control over that. I had no idea that we're going to even use it in season 3. And so it's a big surprise, and it's really a pleasant surprise, I got to tell you.
Did you watch the show?
Yeah, I watched the 2 seasons. I got to tell you, I never really saw The Karate Kid in the movies, even when it first came out. They had a special thing like on a Tuesday night all over the country. They had in select theaters the first 2 episodes of Cobra Kai, because it was on YouTube Red. And if you didn't have YouTube Red, you couldn't really watch it. And then they showed the movie. So my wife and I went, and we went out to dinner. We went to the movies. We watched the first 2 episodes of Cobra Kai. And then I watched the movie in the movies. And when I heard the song, I was like, wow, this really sounds good, especially, so far removed from when I first did it. And it was just really, really cool.
That's amazing. So you had seen it on video or whatever, and your first time seeing your work in The Karate Kid was like 5 years ago or something, like on the big screen.
On the big screen. I mean, I saw it on TV.
Sure.
but it's not the same effect when you go to the movies and watch it. I mean, it sounded so big and powerful. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. My wife said, take it easy. And she always keeps me grounded. She says, all right, that's great. Go take the garbage out.
Right.
Okay, honey.
But when you do it, you're the best around. Nobody takes the garbage out like you.
I wish she could hear that, but she's not here right now. Yeah, there you go.
Joe, I wanted to ask, the song has become such a huge thing in pop culture. Do you have any favorite uses of it when it pops up elsewhere, or a parody or anything like that you remember?
I don't know. I was kind of surprised when people were calling me and telling me Manny Pacquiao walked into the ring with it. And when I hear stuff like that, it makes me proud. You work so hard for so many years doing things. There was a point where my first record company executive, Jimmy Ina, was the musical director for Dirty Dancing. And he was thinking of using myself and Donna for The Time of Your Life. When Donna heard the title, she turned it down. And then they got Bill Medley with Jennifer Lawrence. There was another movie, Prince of Thieves. The song that, what's his name? Bryan Adams, Everything I Do for You. I had a shot at that. I went with them to meet David Kirschenbaum and Jim Mazza, and they were thinking, would you want to do a duet with Brenda Russell, Barbara Streisand, or Linda Ronstadt? I was like, are you kidding me? Of course. We wrote a different song, but then Bryan Adams, I guess they were talking to him too, and of course he wrote a great song for it. So it's those type of things sometimes, I don't even talk about because I didn't get them. And then, most of the times you don't get them, but the one or two times they slip through, it's like, aha, okay, so,
Yeah, it's been all over, some of our favorite shows, Sunny in Philadelphia. And we talked about on the podcast, the documentary King of Kong, which uses it. Have you ever seen it? Did you see that?
No, no, people tell me, hey, it's in the King of Kong. It was on The Simpsons. It was on the Thomas the Train, because I have grandkids and my grandkids watch them. My daughter calls me, your song was on Thomas the Train. I'm like, you kidding me? Believe me, that's how I find out. It's like me trying to connect with you guys today, and I'm like, it says Safari. I don't have an updated Safari. I had to copy and paste it and go to Google Chrome. So I'm not real technical.
No, that's cool. We have a couple more questions. What's the weirdest opportunity this song has brought to you?
The weirdest opportunity?
Yeah.
I don't think there's been any weird opportunities. I'll tell you what I did do a couple of weeks ago. I was asked to do a commercial for this password protection iCloud service called Keeper, and the premise is the husband can't find his password. The wife goes, "Oh, it's on Keeper." He goes, "What's Keeper?" It's where the passwords are. Oh, great! That's the best. You're the best. And there I am. You're the best. It just came out on Facebook like yesterday. I did that a couple of weeks ago. So
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because we're all in Las Vegas, and I love our mutual friend Brandon Powers, who owns Evil Pie and Golden Tiki. When they win an award, they bring you in to sing "You're the Best Around."
Well, I don't think that's weird. I think it's kind of cool. And he's such a cool guy. And that bar, the Golden Tiki, reminds me of like I feel like I'm in Soho in New York. It's such an eclectic type of place where you got these pretty girls with tattoos all over them. It just reminds me of a really cool place. And he also introduced me to Jason Green, who got me on the Karate Kid signing autographs in L.A. last year before all this COVID stuff started, with all bunch of different stars and stuff in L.A. at a hotel. I don't know if it was the Hilton or something like that. So through him, I've gotten to meet some pretty cool people. And they did like a thing where they gave me a shrunken head and they put me in like their wall of fame, like with a bunch of other people. So it's pretty cool, man. Plus, they got great food there too.
Yeah. So
I wanted to ask, speaking of Las Vegas, I know that Pat Morita was living in Vegas towards the end of his life. Did you ever connect with him here or anything like that?
Never. I wish he was alive, because Cobra Kai would have been really special with him in it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He was, to me, that's a big part of that thing that Not that they're missing, but yeah, if he would have been around, that would have been great. No, I never met him at all.
Joe, last question. Now, we kind of talked about the legacy of the song. Did you
Yeah.
have any idea that this movie, that this kind of story would ever have this type of life? How could you, right?
No, like I said, you're doing this, you're doing that. I'll give you for instance. I was working on the movie Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever. Had 4 songs in that movie, and I'm thinking, this is going to be it. And Flashdance, they're like, and Flashdance went through the roof. And Staying Alive did good too, but nothing like Flashdance. And I'm like, So, when I'm recording or whatever I'm doing, you never have any idea what's going to be a hit. Heaven knows, Donna Summer, Neil Bogart, the president, here's this song, MacArthur Park, which was a big hit for her. And on the album, in the MacArthur Park suite, it breaks down into this thing. Heaven knows they didn't even have a song. And Neil goes, what is that? And they're like, well, that's just a little, he says, that's a hit record. I want Donna to do that. And then Giorgio says, we're going to do a duet and you're going to sing it. I sing it, becomes a number 3 record, sells over 1 million singles again. I'm like, are you kidding me? Had no idea. So
pretty cool.
That's the way the business goes,
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so fun. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, hey, it's been a pleasure for me too. So,
do you have anything you want to plug, Joe? Website, Twitter,
yeah, I'm doing an album with Vinnie Poncia, who is a legendary producer and songwriter. He's written for Elvis Presley. He's written for the Ronettes. He wrote I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss. He wrote You Make Me Feel Like Dancing for Leo Sayer. We're kind of doing like this bluesy R&B type of album. So, stay tuned because even during the pandemic, I have a studio here, so I can send vocals. Thank God I could do this too. I don't just have to sit around and do nothing. I send vocals to the engineer in New York, and he flies them in, and, we have these tracks, and we're doing it. This is the way we're doing an album. In these crazy times,
Well, yeah.
And I'll keep you posted to, let you know when it's ready.
That'll be great. And hopefully soon enough, we'll get to hear it live, at least somewhere here in Vegas again, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Joe, this is awesome. You are the best around. We're so happy to have you on and some amazing stories. So we wanted to thank you. And we're excited for the new album when it comes out. And Cobra Kai Season 3.
Cobra Kai Season 3. Here we go.
Here we go, man. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, Joe.
Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1984, we've been talking about Jason's pick, The Karate Kid, and we just had an amazing conversation with Joe Esposito.
Yeah.
I don't know how we can top that, but we're going to talk a bit now about the legacy of The Karate Kid.
What a great interview. We learned so much there, Josh. And what an exciting time it must have been to be working in soundtracks and in the music industry in general. Like you said, you never know what's going to hit, what's going to miss, and what opportunities come. And he's still going, man. So that's exciting.
That is. And of course, the music is a huge legacy of this movie. We've talked a lot about in the 80s, the sort of importance of soundtracks and how that became such a huge thing. And the hits from here, Joe mentioned the Bananarama song, Cruel Summer, and of course, his song, You're the Best, which became a bigger hit almost decades later. But the soundtrack is such an important element, and those songs have lasted just as much as the movie has.
Yeah, well, certain songs, like Cruel Summer, sounds timeless, right? It doesn't, it's from the 80s, but it could have been released today as like an indie record. You're the Best Around definitely has that 80s feel, but I love what he was saying about how it kind of took off through all these athletes and, sports teams just kind of picking up on it 25 years later. How cool is that? So, and then, the other thing he brought up was Cobra Kai, which has given this whole Karate Kid franchise new life.
Yeah, it's amazing how big a hit that is. And you were saying earlier, it was kind of, I think it was underestimated because people thought this is a cheesy thing and why would we want to watch this weird kind of sequel? It's just trying to capitalize on any pop culture property. And then it was acclaimed. It was well reviewed and it was popular when it premiered on YouTube Red. And then its move to Netflix has just made it even more popular. And there's a third season, I believe, premiering in January.
Yeah.
So maybe even around the time when this is when you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I think January 8th is when it comes out, and they've already renewed it for season 4. And a lot of the times we see this stuff like where it's like, example, Girl Meets World. Now they're parents, and we have to do the same thing, but in like a parental role. Like that's kind of what Cobra Kai is, but it gets it so right. The tone, the stuff between Johnny and Daniel, the kind of growth on Johnny's part as like building this new Cobra Kai, and Daniel, some of the pitfalls he falls into with recreating or resurrecting Miyagi-Do. Like there's so much good stuff. Like Joe was saying, they nail all the references. Like I don't know how they did it, but like I think as far as like I don't want to call it a reboot, but like as like a next generation thing, like it's as good as a project as there's ever been.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to be fair, I only watched the first episode to prep for this, in part because of how much you love it. And it was cute, I guess. There was nothing in that episode that made me feel like I wanted to watch more of it, but it's possible just because I don't have that same inherent love for this property that it didn't grab me. But you can't deny that it's been hugely popular. And I think maybe not more popular than the initial Karate Kid sequels, but certainly more well-respected, let's say, than Karate Kid Part 2 and Part 3, or, of course, the next Karate Kid in 1994 with Hilary Swank and Pat Morita. So props to Cobra Kai, I guess.
Yeah, well, also, Josh, I just want to say, like, one of the beautiful things about it is Macchio and Zabka, they got chops, bro. Like, sometimes we see these, like, teenage stars, like, kind of try to do stuff decades later, and you're like, how were you ever famous? You can't act? These guys really have it, man.
Yeah, well, Ralph Macchio has had, I mean, he didn't become maybe the huge star that you would have expected after the success of this movie, but he's had a very solid career and done some good work as an adult. I mean, my cousin Vinny is looking through his non-Karate Kid filmography. I mean, that's a great movie, and he's a very important part of that movie. And just fairly recently, he was a cop on the David Simon show, The Deuce, on HBO, and he disappears into that part so well that you don't even necessarily realize it's him. So I think he's maybe been underrated, and William Zabka is someone who really had been out of the spotlight a lot more and has come back in that way.
Yeah, and I agree with you. They both were good actors, but you're right. Maybe we underestimated them. I think Macchio had some good turns on The Sopranos, if I'm not mistaken. I never watched The Big Bang Theory, but I know that was like a big storyline where they were saying that Johnny was the real hero. And
it was on How I Met Your Mother.
It's the same show, isn't it, Josh? So
that is not the same show. It's possible they mentioned on The Big Bang Theory as well.
No, you're right. It's How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, and that was where there was in specifically one episode where William Zabka shows up as himself, but because Barney, the character played by Neil Patrick Harris, is such a huge fan of Johnny and is of the belief that Johnny was the real hero of the Karate Kid. But I think that is not something that show invented. It was a response to something that a lot of people had talked about over time.
Right. That is one of those fun things to talk about. And yeah, no, that's definitely it. And I think that's part of the fun of the sparring on Cobra Kai, which you don't know about because you only watched the first one, of like Johnny like saying, well, you stole my girlfriend, or you used an illegal maneuver in the All Valley tournament. And, Daniel obviously has answers for all of that. And, they do call back so many of these things and bring back old characters. And the season 2 finale is one of the wildest shows I've ever seen. Like, it's just nuts how it's basically, not to spoil it, but an entire fight throughout a high school for like 15 minutes between the kind of Miyagi-Do students and the Cobra Kai, and it's just nuts.
I'm sure it is.
Well, I don't care. We get it. You're not going to watch it. I am, and that's cool.
Yeah, no, and again, it is very, very popular, and it has a huge following. You're certainly not the only one. Did you ever see the next Karate Kid or the Jaden Smith remake?
I saw the Jaden Smith remake with you.
Did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
So far today, he's forgotten that he's picked me up at my grandma's to drive cross country, and that we saw the horrible Karate Kid together. Man, you are losing ground in the hetero life mate category today, Josh.
I'm sorry, or I just have a bad memory apparently.
No, it's all good. That movie's horrible, and it didn't get the spirit right, and that's what Cobra Kai does. Like, it tried to be so serious, that one, and it had the right guy for comedy in that Jackie Chan can pull off that very serious, martial arts while having a sense of humor, but they just missed. It was such a miss, that movie.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of the detail about it, but I definitely remembered not liking it. And Jaden Smith, I mean, he's continued. He's done a lot of weird stuff, but he has continued to act in various things, and maybe he's gotten better. But I think that was one of the first things he did, and it really felt like, hey, here's a celebrity kid who gets to be in this movie, even though he maybe doesn't deserve it.
Well, yeah, his dad produced it, and his dad produced Cobra Kai. So I think he has some ownership in the property now, Will Smith. One thing I wanted to say, Josh, is because we talked about like kind of how this movie just kept growing and building. It was a top rental in 1985, VHS rental. So in 84 came out, and then, that word of mouth just kind of took over in 85. That's, number one rental at video stores.
Yeah, it was huge. And it's certainly something that I can imagine that, kids having sleepovers would rent this and watch it, whether or not they'd initially seen it in theaters at first. It did also, I mean, we talked a bit about Ralph Macchio. It certainly it provided kind of a second act for Pat Morita's career. He was a stand-up comedian, and he was known for comedy roles, and he had to work hard to get this role. And it obviously got him an Oscar nomination and allowed him to do some more dramatic stuff. He, like Ralph Macchio, he worked steadily, but I think he never really became as much of a superstar as you might have expected. He had I think immediately after this, he had a police procedural show that he starred in called O'Hara. And he was in the Mulan movies doing voice work, which is probably the biggest non-Karate Kid thing he ended up doing. And I think in his later years, he would guest star in a lot of shows and sort of low budget movies, playing a character who was very much like Mr. Miyagi. And that would just be kind of a joke that, hey, here's this Miyagi-like character. But he was working.
A lot of us remember him from Happy Days. Was it Arnold? He played Arnold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And either from the repeats growing up that were always on, or from the Weezer video for Buddy Holly when he's in there.
And I wonder, Jason, I haven't seen this, but as a stand-up comic, have you seen any of his stand-up? Is he good?
I have not seen any of his stand-up comedy, so I can't answer that, Josh.
All right. Well, I'm glad I asked.
It's a fair question.
Have either of you guys seen The Karate Dog?
Is he in that? I hope he's.
Apparently he is. Yeah,
that's unfortunate.
It's got to be just a cameo.
The Karate Dog, like, is that just part of like a Air Bud franchise, or is that a spin-off?
Yeah, it's like a direct-to-video dog movie. Yeah, no, it's nothing major.
Well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, he did a lot of those kinds of parts, I think, in his later years, where he would just get hired to riff on Mr. Miyagi. And I mean, I'm sure he got paid, and that's cool, but it's a shame that he didn't really get to dig into some more substantial parts there later on. And John G. Avildsen and Robert Mark Kamen, the director and screenwriter, they both went on to work on the next two sequels, which were not as much, well regarded. And Avildsen, sadly, following this, was nominated twice for the Razzie for Worst Director for Karate Kid Part 3 and for Rocky 5. So his returns to his glory days did not work out that well.
No, he did have one more. I mean, if you look at Rocky, Karate Kid, Lean on Me, those are three, iconic films. So he had three, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, I know that is pretty good. But I think, again, it's something where his career didn't take off necessarily in the way that you would have hoped or imagined. I'm sure he got plenty of money for those Karate Kid sequels, but not as much the respect that you might have expected. Hey,
Josh, one other thing that as it relates to awesome movie year on Avildsen, he was originally slated to direct Saturday Night Fever, and it wasn't working out, so he was replaced.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that, I think, in our Saturday Night Fever episode. And Robert Mark Kamen, it's kind of amazing. He is still a working screenwriter for these big blockbuster type movies. I mean, in the 80s, he wrote Lethal Weapon 3, and then he hooked up with Luc Besson, and he was the co-writer on the Taken movies and the Transporter movies, which, Jason, I know you're a fan of those.
I like Taken. I don't love all the Transporter stuff, but he is not only just working in this huge blockbuster arena, but he's like, I listen to script notes every week, and He's a beloved screenwriter for other screenwriters like co-host Craig Mazin over there.
Yeah, he's done really well. And just last year, he wrote the terrible but successful Gerard Butler movie, Angel Has Fallen. So good for him doing that stuff. And I think he may actually, this was on Wikipedia, so it may not be right, but I think he may actually have joined the writing staff of Cobra Kai for the 3rd season that's coming up.
Well, that's what a thrill it would be to be in that writer's room, huh?
That is so true.
Yeah.
With both the creator of The Karate Kid and the creators of Harold and Kumar teaming up together. Pretty amazing.
I mean, that's a good deal. Joe Esposito, listen up in season 3 for You're the Best Around.
Yes. Anything else you want to add on the legacy of The Karate Kid, Jason?
I think we hit it, Josh. In another 15, 20 years, it'll still be here. It's going to be one of those movies that lives on like Chaplin, buddy.
Are you comparing this to Charlie Chaplin?
Nope. I'm saying that Charlie Chaplin's films live on and The Karate Kid will live on.
Okay. Let's end on that note then. That's The Karate Kid. And that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Thanks again to Joe Esposito for joining us. And check us out on social media.
Yeah, give us a look on the old social media. I'm Jason Harris Comedy on Facebook and Instagram. Jay Harris Comedy on Twitter. Go for Jason.com. Got beat in the All Valley tournament for websites very early on. We're on AwesomeMovieYear.com. That's got a feed. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, and Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter.
I am at JoshBellHatesEverything.com, which I think in recent episodes I said I was going to add some things to, and that didn't happen. But it's still there. Also, Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And you can listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. And also don't forget to check out our Produced by David Rosen Patreon, which includes bonus content from Awesome Movie Year and Piecing It Together and my music career. And speaking of awesome movie soundtracks, I'm planning on putting some exclusive stuff from movies I've worked on there soon. So some cool music stuff getting added there.
And is Jason H on there, the song you wrote for me, Dave, in the style of Axel F?
Absolutely. It is on there as a free download for anyone who subscribes.
Fantastic.
And of course, the picture of Dave in his karate outfit will be there.
In his gi.
Definitely.
Yes. So, Jason, what do we have on our next episode?
Hey, Josh, the Sundance Film Festival. Guess what year it started?
I'm guessing it was 1984.
You're right, Josh. So we have the first ever winner of the Sundance Film Festival, and it is called Old Enough.
So tune in next time for Old Enough, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
Yeah, we're excited.
Well, don't get too excited. Take it easy.
I've lowered my expectations already.
Okay, good.